The city lights of Berlin blurred in the damp night air as I drove through the narrow streets. It was late, too late, and yet I felt no rush to get home. Lena had sent me a message earlier, short and neutral. "I'm working late tonight. Don't worry." She never used to write like that. It wasn't just the fact that she was staying late, it was how she phrased it. Once, she would have sent a playful message, maybe with a kiss emoji or a quick "miss you." But today, just a dry statement, as if I were her boss, not her husband. I parked in front of our apartment building and sat there for a moment, staring up at the lit windows. She was home. A strange feeling spread through my chest. Not anger, not fear, but a quiet unease, creeping into me like a slow-acting poison. I opened the door, stepped into the hallway, and heard the water running in the kitchen. Lena stood with her back to me, washing a knife in the sink, a glass of wine beside her. Her blonde hair cascaded loosely over her shoulders, and when she turned around, she smiled. But it wasn't real. It was a polite, practiced smile, the kind you give strangers. "You're home late," she said, as if she were surprised, even though she clearly wasn't. "So are you," I replied, hanging up my jacket. She shrugged and took a sip of wine. "Yeah, I had a lot to finish at work." I leaned against the doorframe, watching her. Once, she would have told me exactly what she had been working on, complained about a client, laughed about an annoying coworker. But now, just vague answers. "What exactly kept you so late?" I asked casually. "Oh, you know this and that." She waved it off and sat down on the couch, pulling her legs up as she scrolled through her phone. And then it happened. It was one of those cruel tricks of fate, a fleeting moment where truth slices through illusion like a blade. She shifted slightly, and her phone screen lit up. I saw it, just for a second, but it was enough. Max Red Heart. My stomach clenched. My name never had a heart next to it. I glanced at her face, but she hadn't noticed. Her fingers glided over the screen, typing something. Her lips curved into a soft smile, a genuine one, the kind she hadn't given me in months. I forced myself to stay calm, even as my pulse thundered in my ears. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. Maybe I had misread it. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. Or maybe, in that single second, I had just seen the first crack in our marriage. The night was silent, but inside my head, a storm raged. I lay next to Lena in bed, unmoving, while her breathing was slow and steady. She was deep asleep, as if she had no burdens weighing on her. I wished I could say the same, but the image of her phone screen wouldn't leave me alone. Max Red Heart. It wasn't just a name. It wasn't just an innocent contact. It was a name with a heart next to it. I tried to convince myself that it meant nothing. Maybe he was just a friend, a coworker, someone from an old group chat. Maybe she had saved it like that absent-mindedly. But deep down, I knew better. I looked at her phone on the nightstand, just within reach. I could pick it up, just for a second, just to be sure. But something stopped me. Did I really not trust my wife? Had I really sunk so low that I needed to go through her messages in secret? I turned onto my side and closed my eyes. But sleep never came. By the time I got up in the morning, Lena was already in the kitchen. She was wearing her tight black blouse, the one she usually only wore for big client meetings. Her makeup was flawless, her hair smooth and perfect. She looked different. "You're up early," I said, forcing my voice to sound casual. She glanced at me with a quick smile. "Busy day ahead. Big presentation." I nodded and poured myself some coffee. Her fingers danced across her phone screen, typing something quickly. My stomach twisted. Who was she texting? I didn't want to know. And yet, the question burned inside me. Who's Max? It came out before I could stop myself. She froze for just a fraction of a second. But I saw it. That tiny hesitation, the blink, the brief pause before she answered. Then she laughed. "Max? You mean Max from marketing? He's been working with me on a project." "What?" I watched her closely. She sounded casual. But was she really? "No reason," I said, pretending to be indifferent. "I just saw his name pop up yesterday." Lena took a sip of her coffee and shrugged. "Yeah, we text a lot. But it's just work stuff. Just work." I could have let it go. I could have nodded and changed the subject. But I wanted more. "Then why does his name have a heart next to it?" This time, she reacted faster. "Oh, that." She laughed again, a little too naturally. "That was a joke. A colleague changed it once, and I never bothered to fix it. A joke. Maybe it was the truth. Maybe it wasn't." I forced a smile. "Got it." Lena set her phone down and got up from the table. I noticed how relieved she looked, as if she was glad to be done with the conversation. I really need to go? It's going to be a stressful day. I nodded, but as she kissed me goodbye, it felt different. Shorter, colder. I watched her leave, and I knew this wasn't over. The day dragged on endlessly. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting back to Lena. Could it really be that simple? Just a coworker, a harmless joke? Then why did it feel so wrong? By late afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I lied to myself, saying it wasn't because I didn't trust her, that I was just curious. But the truth was, I needed to know. I opened my laptop and logged into our shared phone account. Normally, I only used it for checking bills and contracts. But today, I was looking for something else. Call logs. I typed in Lena's number and pulled up the last few weeks. And there it was. Max, every day, sometimes multiple times. Late at night, early in the morning, sometimes for hours. My pulse pounded. I clicked over to the text messages. I couldn't see the content, but I could see the frequency. Hundreds of messages. More than she had sent me in an entire month. This wasn't just work. I leaned back in my chair, my hands shaking slightly. What was I supposed to do? Confront her? Would she lie? Would she try to talk her way out of it? Or should I wait? Find out more? I closed the laptop and ran a hand over my face. I needed clarity. So I made the only decision left to me. I would follow her. I never thought I would be the kind of man who spies on his own wife. And yet, here I was, parked 2 streets away from her office, watching the entrance through my windshield. I told myself this wasn't stalking. This wasn't paranoia. I was simply searching for the truth. I just needed to make sure. But deep down, I knew the truth already. I just wanted proof. Lena had told me she'd be working late again. It was already past 7, and the office was slowly emptying. Her colleagues walked out in small groups or alone, some stopping to chat, others lighting cigarettes in the cold Berlin air. But Lena didn't come out. I waited. Minutes stretched into an hour. My phone buzzed, a message from her. Running late, still in a meeting. Don't wait up. I love you. Love. I stared at the word. Weeks ago, I might have smiled, felt reassured. But now, it was just a hollow sound, meaningless. And then it happened. The glass doors of the office opened again, and Lena stepped out. Not alone. A tall, well-dressed man walked beside her, slim, confident, a long coat draped over his arm. Max. I knew it was him even before I saw his face. She laughed at something he said, tilting her head slightly, her eyes glowing in a way I hadn't seen in months. She reached out, barely touching his arm. A simple, fleeting gesture. But I knew my wife. Nothing she did was meaningless. My pulse pounded. I gripped the steering wheel, forcing myself to stay calm. I couldn't let them see me. I needed to know where they were going. A taxi pulled up. They got in together. I let them drive ahead before starting my car and following at a safe distance. The streets of Berlin were still busy, the evening rush lingering, cars honking, headlights flashing. I kept my distance, my hands sweating against the steering wheel. The taxi weaved through the city, passing restaurants, bars, theaters. And then it stopped. A hotel. A sleek, modern business hotel, the kind designed for discretion. The kind used for affairs. I parked further down the street and watched as they got out. They walked in, side by side, without hesitation. No awkwardness. No nerves. She had been here before. My hands clenched into fists. I should have been furious. I should have been blinded by rage. But what I felt was something else. Numbness. A hollow, gaping emptiness. Every moment over the past months made sense now. The sudden late nights. The distant kisses. The avoidance of real conversations. She had already left me. I had just been too blind to see it. I could storm into the lobby, confront her, make a scene. But that wouldn't be enough. Lena had been playing her own game. Now, it was time for me to start playing mine. I took out my phone and snapped a picture of the hotel entrance. Then I drove away, never looking back. I didn't go home. I couldn't. Not with the image of Lena and Max disappearing into that hotel, burned into my mind like a scar. Instead, I parked in a dark side street, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My breath was shallow, my thoughts racing in endless circles. I needed to do something. Anything. Sitting in silence would only drive me insane. My phone lay on the passenger seat, mocking me with its presence. I grabbed it and opened our shared phone account. I should have done this earlier. Maybe I didn't want to. Maybe a part of me still clung to the illusion that Lena wasn't the woman I was now seeing so clearly. But the moment I clicked into the records, there was no going back. I typed in her number and pulled up her call history for the last few months. My pulse pounded as I scrolled. Max. Every day? Multiple times. Late at night. Early in the morning. Some calls lasted minutes, others hours. I checked the text history next. I couldn't read the actual messages, but I didn't need to. The sheer number of them told me everything I needed to know. Hundreds. More than she had ever sent me. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring. This wasn't some fleeting mistake. This wasn't a one-time betrayal. This was a pattern, a routine, a life she had built outside of ours. I exhaled slowly, my breath shaking. What was I supposed to do? Confront her? Demand an explanation? She would only lie. No, I needed something bigger. I needed to make sure she lost as much as she had taken from me. I opened Google Maps and searched for the hotel's address. Then I looked up Max. I didn't need much. His first name and his company were enough. Within minutes, I had his full name. Max Wagner. Married. 2 children. A bitter laugh escaped my throat. So, he wasn't just a coworker. He wasn't just some random fling. He was a man with as much to lose as Lena. My mind worked quickly now, faster than it had in months. My emotions faded into the background, replaced by sharp focus. I took screenshots of everything, the call logs, the text records, the hotel bookings on our shared credit card. I backed them up, sent them to myself, making sure they couldn't be erased. Then I dug deeper. Max's wife, Katerina Wagner. I found her Facebook profile. She looked kind. The kind of woman who had no idea her husband was in a hotel room with someone else right now. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. How do you tell someone their life is a lie? How do you send a message that will destroy their world? I kept it simple. I attached the photos, the screenshots, and wrote one line. I thought you should know. It took 2 minutes for her to respond. Who are you? I replied. Someone in the same position as you. Your husband and my wife are having an affair. I'm sorry you have to find out this way. The typing indicator blinked. Then proof. I sent everything. She saw it. Read it. Then silence. Minutes passed. Then a single reply. Thank you. That was it. No outburst. No disbelief. Just cold, quiet understanding. I leaned back in my seat, staring at the ceiling. My heart was still hammering, but I felt something new. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. I had thrown the first stone. Now, I just had to wait for everything to collapse. I expected Katerina Wagner to explode with rage, to call me screaming, to deny it, to accuse me of lying. But she didn't. She simply wrote, "Thank you." That unsettled me more than if she had reacted with anger. I couldn't begin to imagine what she was feeling as she stared at the evidence I had sent her. The proof that her husband had been deceiving her for months. That the life she had built with him was a lie. But I knew one thing. She wouldn't stay silent. She had a weapon now, and she would use it. I waited. Minutes turned to hours. My phone stayed quiet. No calls. No messages from Lena. She had no idea that the life she had so carefully constructed was already beginning to crack. Then, just after midnight, my phone buzzed. Not from Katerina. From Lena. I'll be home late. Just out with colleagues. Love you. Love. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. She was probably lying in a hotel bed right now, tangled up with Max, her lips whispering the same empty words into his ear that she had once whispered into mine. But not for much longer. I didn't reply. Instead, I unlocked my phone and typed out a message. To Max. Go home. Now. Then I set my phone down and waited. It was nearly 2 in the morning when I heard the door. The handle turned slowly, cautiously, as if she were hoping I was already asleep. I wasn't. She stepped inside, her heels clicking softly on the wooden floor. She froze when she saw me sitting in the living room, the lamp casting long shadows across the room. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then she smiled. That fake, practice smile. You're still up? I didn't answer. I just watched her. I wanted to see how long she could pretend. It was a long night, she continued, running a hand through her hair. Just some drinks with colleagues. Sorry if I woke you. I stood up slowly. Come on, Adam, she said with forced laughter. Not even a hello? No hug. She stepped closer, reaching out for me. I moved back. Her smile faltered. What's wrong? I took a slow breath. How long? She blinked. What? How long have you been lying to me, Lena? She went completely still. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice tight. I laughed. A quiet, sharp sound. Oh, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I pulled my phone from my pocket and turned the screen toward her. I had already opened the messages. The photos. The call logs. Her face drained of color. That's not what it looks like. I cut her off. Don't insult me. She swallowed hard. Her eyes darted, searching for an escape. Then, suddenly, she did something that nearly knocked the breath from my lungs. She laughed. Not nervous laughter. Not guilty laughter. A real, amused laugh. I felt my fingers curl into fists. Oh, Adam, she sighed, shaking her head. You're so naive. I said nothing. Did you really think you had control? That you'd just catch me, and I'd fall to my knees and beg for forgiveness? She tilted her head, her expression cold, calculating. Sorry, but that's not how the world works. I remained silent. Yes, she said, her voice lower now, sharper. I cheated on you. And you know what? It was incredible. I breathed in through my nose, slow and deep. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times. I thought she would lie. I thought she would cry. I thought she would fight to save what we had. But this indifference. I never would have told you, she continued softly. Never. Because you don't matter to me anymore. My heart pounded. So what now, Adam? She crossed her arms. Are you going to throw me out? Call the police? Or are you too much of a coward to do anything at all? I looked at her for a long time. Then I shook my head. No, Lena. I'm not doing any of that. She raised an eyebrow. Oh no. No, I said calmly. Because from now on, you get to live with the consequences of your choices. Her smirk wavered. I held up my phone. Do you know who I spoke to tonight? She hesitated. Then realization dawned. No, she whispered. I nodded. Katerina knows. Her eyes went wide. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I stepped closer. Max is on his way home right now. I bet his night is going even worse than yours. She staggered back. Her hands trembled. Adam, you can't do this. I leaned in, lowering my voice. I already did. Then I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard her suck in a breath, her perfect world crashing down around her. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint noises coming from the living room. Lena hadn't come to bed. She was pacing back and forth, stopping every few minutes, probably trying to convince herself this wasn't real, that she could still talk her way out of this, that she still had a move left to play. But not this time. By the time I got up in the morning, she was already sitting at the kitchen table. She looked terrible. Her eyes were bloodshot, her skin pale. She hadn't slept either. We need to talk, she said as soon as I entered the room. I poured myself a coffee and sat down across from her. About what? She swallowed hard. Adam, this can't be how it ends. I took a sip of coffee, set the cup down, and looked at her. Oh, but it is. I know I made a mistake, she said quickly. But we can fix this. We've been together for so many years. You can't just throw that away. I leaned forward slightly. Lena, you threw it away. Not me. Her hands clenched into fists. It was a moment of weakness. I wanted to, I don't know, feel alive again. I wanted to feel wanted. It was never about you. I shook my head. No, Lena. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was months, maybe even years, of lies. This wasn't just a mistake. You betrayed me. You lied to my face. And now that you're losing everything, you suddenly want to talk. She bit her lip. I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. Not fear of losing me. Fear of what was coming next. I leaned back. You always thought you were in control, that you were playing the game, but you never realized that I saw right through you. Her eyes flickered with something, confusion, uncertainty. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. Then I opened a file and turned the screen toward her. Read. Lena picked up the phone, her fingers shaking. She scanned the text, and I saw her entire body tense. This is... She stopped, her voice breaking. Yes, Lena, I said calmly. That's your termination letter. She looked up at me, her face frozen in shock. You sent this to my company? I shook my head. Not me. Katerina did. Her breath hitched. Her entire body stiffened as realization set in. No, that's impossible. She wouldn't. I shrugged. Did you think she would stay silent? She has evidence, Lena. Your boss won't risk a scandal. He'll cut you loose without hesitation. Lena shot up from her chair. You can't do this. This is my job. My career. I stayed seated. And I was your husband. She stared at me, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Her fingers dug into her hair, like she was trying to physically pull herself together. What do I do? She asked finally. I took another sip of coffee before answering. Pack your things. Lena stepped back as if I had struck her. No, please. Adam, please. I have nowhere to go. I leaned forward. You didn't have a problem finding a place to go when you were meeting Max in hotel rooms. Now it's not my problem. Her lips trembled. I love you, Adam. I laughed softly. You don't even know what that word means. She breathed heavily, her gaze darting around the room, as if looking for an escape. But there was none. You can't stay here, I said finally. I'll give you 2 hours. Then you leave. She collapsed into the chair again. Tears spilled down her cheeks. But I felt nothing. No anger. No pity. Just relief. I stood up, grabbed my car keys, and walked toward the door. Before leaving, I turned back to look at her one last time. You wanted my support, Lena. But when I gave you exactly that, you realized there was nothing left. Then I walked out, leaving her alone in the ruins of her own choices. The door shut behind me with a heavy finality, sealing the fate of everything we had once been. I stood outside, inhaling the crisp Berlin morning air, letting it fill my lungs and cleanse the weight that had been suffocating me for months. Her last words still echoed in my mind. I love you, Adam. A lie. The only thing Lena had ever truly loved was control. The illusion that she was the one shaping her world, bending people's emotions to her will. But now, as she sat alone in that house, her carefully constructed life crumbling around her, she was finally seeing the truth. She had never been in control. I walked to my car, my hand steady as I gripped the door handle. My heart wasn't pounding with rage anymore. My mind wasn't clouded with doubt. For the first time in months, I felt clear. Free. My phone vibrated. I pulled it out and glanced at the screen. A message from Katerina. He's gone. Thank you. A slow smile tugged at my lips. I could picture Max now, standing in his doorway, his wife's cold, unwavering eyes staring him down as she threw his belongings into the hall. I imagined his pathetic stammering, his desperate pleas, the realization dawning in his mind that he had lost everything. And Lena, I wondered if she was still sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the termination letter, her mind scrambling for a way out. Or if she had moved on to packing already, shoving clothes into a suitcase, her fingers trembling as the reality of what she had done fully set in. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. I got into my car, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb. The streets of Berlin stretched ahead of me, familiar yet different. Everything looked the same, but I had changed. I didn't know where I was going yet. I had no plan, no destination. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't need one. I was finally free.